Welcome, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for the webinar today. My name is Marianne Hensley, and I'm the Vice President of Media Operations here at FreightWaves, and we are excited to present today's webinar in partnership with Winmore. Today, we'll be exploring the advantages of using dedicated software to manage the RFP process versus using a CRM, and I'm excited to be joined by John Golob, Founder and Chief Marketing Officer of Winmore, who will be sharing his insights as well as a case study on how one of their partners has evolved from using a CRM to using collaboration software to achieve their goals, as well as the impact that that has had on their business. John will also be joining us for a live Q&A following the presentation, so make sure you have your questions ready for him once we get to that. Before we get started, if you have any issues during the webinar, you can reach out to our team via the chat function in your Zoom control panel. And if you have questions that you would like to send in for John for the audience Q&A, you can enter those through the Q&A tab in your control panel. And at this point, I will go ahead and turn it over to John. Welcome, John, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much, Marianne, for having me. It's a real pleasure to be working with the team here at FreightWaves again. And congratulations, Marianne, on a big week. We were excited to read the news of the alliance with the Air Forwarding Association, which is very exciting for us to see the FreightWaves network growing even more and extending more broadly into the global freight forwarding space. So big congratulations to you, Craig, Kevin, and the team, and very excited for this week's news.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. And so today we're going to be talking about contracted revenue and the importance of streamlining the RFP process that I think so many freight brokers and carriers have done their best to manage in Excel or CRMs. But I think there's certainly a lot that we've done and a lot of great insight that we've shared over the last several years. But there's nothing quite like learning firsthand from a real-life case study. And so it's really my pleasure to be here with a customer of ours, Shawn Masters, who many of you know from an extensive career in logistics and transportation and is now Chief Commercial Officer of ProTrans, which is headquartered outside Indianapolis, Indiana. And then it's really a pleasure to be here with Shawn.
When did we first, wasn't it like 2 years ago? I believe it was. I tracked you down and introduced myself, and there was, I think, somebody from your team, or it might have been even you standing there, and started the conversation around, a different approach to a CRM. Yes, that was early on before we got serious.
Yeah, exactly. and I love the comment we made earlier, which is back then software and technology was day 3 at 4 o'clock at the conference.
Right.
Nobody wanted to talk about software.
Exactly.
No one wanted to talk about innovation. No one wanted to talk about technology. It was almost an afterthought.
Right, exactly. And it's funny because I tend to go to those conferences to try to get, what's coming up, what's the newest insight, what's out there. We kind of, over time brought the business intelligence to our company through that, and brought, some of the electronic tracking thought processes and changing the mindset of, check calls of a carrier versus continuous tracking. And our conversations kind of led us into even a different approach to a CRM, or not even necessarily a CRM, but how we manage the entire RFQ process and sales process here at ProTrans. It's not just any longer tracking sales calls and trying to get your name on RFQ list. It's so much more integrated and defined than that nowadays. So
yeah,
it's definitely different.
And what a difference! Faster and data driven.
Right.
And now it's day 1 at 10 a.m. in the keynote, not day 3 at 4 o'clock.
All right. So this is the focus.
Exactly, that's the focus. So we're getting ahead of ourselves. Maybe we can just take a step back and talk a little bit about first your background, Shawn. Do you mind giving us a little sense of your career and how you landed here at ProTrans?
Yeah, sure. I started my career out of college really working for a steel company. Zero software, definitely everything very rudimentary and basic. Then I actually moved into plant management and found out very quickly that wasn't a career path that I liked. So ended up at a very large 3PL, was there for about 7 years, managing really tier 1 automotive business, and trying to do things a little differently than we've done before at that company, and bringing different ideas and different ways, from a software perspective to manage business and things of that nature. And then ended up with ProTrans about 14 years ago now. And with the mindset of really just starting a 3PL from the bones that ProTrans had as a consolidation carrier, really an LTL consolidation carrier. And from there, we were able to really develop a different type of program. And from my perspective, I had the unique position of being able to really start that division up as a chief logistics officer, moved into more of a chief operating officer position as the vice president of operations. And then, now I'm a chief commercial officer, dealing very intricately with the customers and account management of the business. So progressed over time, but definitely a challenging but rewarding career. So,
and ProTrans has done really well over the years too. I mean, it's gone, as you mentioned, from a very much niche service provider to being a real major player in the automotive space. Can you walk through ProTrans's core strengths and some of the deep relationships that you forged, especially in the area of manufacturing?
Yeah, we've always had, we really developed during the time of NAFTA when in 1993 when all of that was really on the forefront of being put together. And our owner, Craig Rader, had a vision of how he could support that type of business model, and built business with some very, very large automotive suppliers that worked both in the United States and in Canada and Mexico, really focusing on that whole NAFTA transportation model. So over time, there was a need, and what he really did was listen to the customers in defining, what they needed. So we moved from, being a pure consolidation company to really managing some warehouse business to expanding the inventory management for our customers, and trying to solve a lot of their ongoing issues that they had at the time that they had them. And, that also led into us starting up the third-party logistics division because they wanted somebody to manage all of their business for them and bring in optimization tools and go-forward strategies that weren't just moving part A to part B, from that standpoint. So we're good.
And how have you structured the organization today? I mean, you've obviously grown quite a bit. When you think about your roles and responsibility, both from a point of view of people, process, and technology, can you give a little bit of color on how you thought about each of those and where ProTrans has arrived at this growth point, given the strength of the economy and these long-standing relationships you have?
Yeah, so we have a sales team, we have an operations team, we have our account management group, really with different executives that head up those different groups. And then we have, of course, the core back-end business portions with the accounting and quality and IT and everything that comes with that. So, I think our focus has been how do we manage our customers' businesses as well as execute it, because we're in a unique position where we actually do both. And it's a little different business model than some of our competitors have in the marketplace, but a vision that I think does us well for us to be able to plan as well as execute those plans that come to fruition. So,
great. And when you think about where we were over, say, a year ago, right? Mm-hmm. We had that first introduction at an industry trade event. It's probably worth mentioning that it was not a FreightWaves conference. FreightWaves conference, on the other hand, would have been filled with rich insight around innovation and technology. This, on the other hand, was probably much more, let's just say, uninspiring.
Yeah.
Right. So we had a chance to meet, and I think at that point you were using some other software for your sales backbone and your operational systems. Do you mind walking through a little bit about what the environment was like before we started working together?
Yeah, so we were utilizing the Salesforce software. From that perspective, though, there was a lot of outside consulting, outside management that we couldn't necessarily do ourselves. So we would think of ideas, things to improve, but there was such a process for us to be able to get those into the software and to be able to utilize those ideas that, we were looking for kind of an alternative solution that gave us a similar functionality. Because the Salesforce tool it did bring a lot of structure, did handle the business aspect for us, but there was too much management from an outside perspective that we needed to address on a continuous basis. So, as we met, and we started talking, it was very intriguing to us on having the ability ourselves to do a lot of the things that we had focused on an outsource perspective before.
And was it more detrimental to the business to have to spend the money for the outside consultants with the previous CRM software, or the amount of time it would take to increment the changes in the technology, which in turn influenced the time required to change the process?
Yeah, I think the time to market, of course, is such a big piece of what we try to do, right? The speed in which we can deliver different aspects of either our pricing or our solution or whatever the case is. And then the cost aspect is always considered, but there's normally an ROI or a mindset approach that allowed for us to justify such a cost. The speed to market, though, and our ability to think and to utilize that software, then having to go somebody, write a scope document, get a pricing established for such a change, that time could have lost us a sale or many sales that we aren't even aware of. So that part of it was important to us to be able to manage ourselves and give us the flexibility and ownership to make changes, utilize the resources that Winmore has, which are very, very helpful, and but allows us to not have to go through that truly methodical process to get there. So.
And I imagine also some of the product functionality that came out of the box with Winmore too.
Yeah, absolutely. It gave us everything we needed from a conversion standpoint that we were already doing today. We really run a 5-phase sales process, which is a little unique because it's not the structured process that everybody really has. So it's more, we were concerned of how our independent structure or modeling would fit in with an outside software, and we found that to be, with the Winmore flexibility, very easily developed within the software itself. And to this day, we continue to run through that process. In all reality, we've certainly streamlined how we do things and how we operate, and taking advantage of the out of the box stuff that's there. And in reality, we have not had a need to go back to Winmore for actual development. All of the things that we need to run the business and to run through our sales processes, we've been able to do in-house today ourselves. So.
And if we roll back the clock then to a year and a half ago, you talked a little bit about the sales process. If you can remember some of the details, how was that RFQ qualification and response process in the manual email Excel CRM days? Can you sort of paint a picture?
It's a little clunky. A little clunky.
Okay.
So
define clunky.
I'd say, clunky and not necessarily as transparent. Things were managed by people, not necessarily a process or a software. So therefore, the whole picture was not necessarily always seen. Even though Salesforce gave us the tool to manage the sales process, we still ran into some black holes, still some inabilities to see overall the RFQ from the point of the RFQ arriving to the point that it went out the door. It allowed for some success, but not necessarily a fully transparent process that drove speed to the market, consistent responses, and a whole vision of the sales process itself. So, clunky from that perspective, I guess, is to summarize.
Did it ever get to a point where the customers took notice?
Customers are always, wanting to get responses as quickly as possible and meeting those deadlines. I definitely think that, back then, a year or 18 months ago, we were able to reply, but we were inconsistent at times with some of those replies. The ability to pull it all together in the last minute is something that we really rely on Winmore to do today, because it puts everything from an RFQ standpoint into a single focus and perspective. So it allows for that. Customers, today can see that, there isn't a lot of, can we get another day on this? Can we get another week for us to reply? Because a lot of that stuff is all managed, and we don't have the time wasted between tasks that we may have had before because of some of the out-of-the-box stuff that we do get with Winmore today. So,
huge point, yeah. And then how about organizing the team? I mean, if you think back on the business case, right?
Yep.
These days, obviously, given the dynamic nature of the market, you need a strong business case, right? You got to be able to say, hey, we're going to invest in the software, and here's our ROI. Can you walk through how you managed up, how you built the case to say, now's the time that we've got to invest in the software to help with that RFQ and sales process?
Yeah, so we have a small marketing team. We have a larger analysis team, a procurement group, and at some point you have to understand how all those teams interact and can continue the process where they may not be in the same location, they may not be in the same day-to-day focus, and still have the ability to see the big picture of what is needed to be done from each of their perspectives. So, our groups, we continue to have a marketing group, but there's a single person that does really all of the RFQ management. There's a pricing team now that is very much integrated within the software. Same with our procurement group, both from a sell perspective of our rates, but also from a buy perspective with our carriers. So we have that whole visibility within the Winmore platform that gives us a streamlined team, per se, that helps manage this. So.
And you've also got a really strong administrator here, right?
Yes.
Someone you've had a chance to spend time with, who really is a bit of an all-star.
Yes, Paul was fantastic. He took it upon himself to really work with the Winmore team and understand the software and platform, as well as work with all the groups internally within ProTrans. But the reality was, it wasn't a hard process for him to do so. Because of the easy functionality that there is from a user interface standpoint. But he is definitely understands the ability to talk the IT speak, per se, and work, taking something that a team may need and translating that to how the Winmore team can help support that, which is a skill set that's not always easy to find. Somebody that can convert a need into an IT requirement, right? So he does a very good job with that.
When you sat down roughly a year ago or so and said, hey, now's the time for change, we're going to be looking at software differently, as you sat down and talked to your pricing and the carrier and procurement and even the reps as well, do you remember going through that discussions and how those went? Was there a sense of what internal selling needed to happen, or
I think
how would you describe that?
I think there was a hesitation of the unknown, probably. Salesforce gave us a significant platform that we hadn't had before. A sales team that was comfortable with the name of the product necessarily, but it didn't necessarily give a smooth and what I described earlier as a significant ease of use from their perspective. There was a lot of talk around the putting sales calls in was difficult, putting their opportunities in was too cumbersome, things like that. So,
and the RFQ piece too. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. The RFQ piece. We didn't necessarily have a great platform from the RFQ standpoint. It was managed within the overall spectrum of a bid, but it wasn't necessarily focused on overall of all of the aspects to meet the needs of the RFQ itself. And, that's one thing we did focus on, and with the help of the Winmore team, how do we streamline that and utilize the information and that's not only available for this particular bid, but across, the platform itself to help us understand how to respond to some of these RFQs and give us a better percentage of wins moving forward. So, yeah.
And I think when we look back on it, right, if I remember correctly, we signed our deal around the 5th of the month. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we were live on the 31st.
Yes, we moved very quickly. And the Winmore team, was able to really engage very quickly. And they did an exceptional job of moving us through that process. Tiffany and the entire groups within Winmore, kept us on task as well as did so much on the back end to assure that conversion was in place. Now, truth be known, we were continuing to talk to Salesforce on a plan B that we never thought was going to be necessary, but thank goodness it wasn't. So it absolutely cut off on December 31st. And we didn't miss a beat from our perspective on the Winmore, as it was up and running on January 1, really with the full conversion of all of our documents, all of our records, and a full functional CRM within that time frame, which is quite amazing in all honesty. So, it does make everyone a little nervous to start, but I think that smoothed out when we saw how fast and motivated and integrated the team got quickly, and between Paul and the Winmore team, got it done. So
25-day implementation with one of those days being Christmas, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we know how to move quickly. And a lot of it, I think, points to a comment you made earlier about our focus just on the logistics industry, right? And having a product that you could be used on day one. I think our head of engineering would probably say that was 23 days too long, right? You should be able to use the product immediately. And I think we've made some strides there for some integrations and data imports that we had to address.
Absolutely. And then we touched on it earlier, but I do have to say, as we were looking for different partners and providers of the CRM replacement for Salesforce, one of the big reasons we went with Winmore was because of its focus entirely on the logistics space. We think we're in a little bit of a unique industry from a service standpoint, and having somebody that's entirely focused on the needs that we have in the RFQ space and the overall spectrum of our sales processes, it fits very, very nicely in all around perspective. So, yeah, that was a big deal for us.
So you described the process before as being a bit clunky, right? The round hole is the square peg in the round hole. Right. Trying to make RFQs work in a CRM product built for maybe a bank or a tech company, right, not logistics.
Right.
And then probably built for a face-to-face sale process, not an RFQ, right?
Exactly.
So how did it work out, right? Now we're on the platform for close to a year.
Yep.
Using the Winmore app day in and day out. Can you highlight or describe the environment now and how it both changes your role as a commercial leader?
Yeah, I think it's much smoother. I mean, I think there's visibility, there's simplified use, and we've accomplished some of the things that we set out for from that standpoint.
And I'm thrilled to hear that, Shawn.
The salespeople are put their opportunities in quickly in a much streamlined perspective, and we get everything we need from a sales management standpoint from our standpoint. So it's very good. Very happy with the transition. Very happy with where we're going, and super excited about where Winmore's going on some of the product roadmap and things that we're aware of from that standpoint. I think the changes and the improvements that are going to be coming again out of the box are going to continue to aid us in managing that entire process. So,
and you talked a lot about the importance of those RFQs and qualifying, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a big part of Winmore's focus is to help teams collaborate, sales working with pricing working with the carriers, for example, to really make the best decisions when those RFQs show up and when those input through the system. Is there a way in which you kind of think or describe that, of how that's now in an improved collaborative Winmore-enabled state compared to how you were too?
Yeah, I think it's stuff that the way that Winmore operates and the way that it's structured does give you that, allows you to do the diligence, allows you to do the qualification. Doesn't make sense for us as a company. So, we have to have something that both fits our model and can bring value to the customers. And Winmore helps us differentiate those opportunities that do that for us and those that don't. And we don't want to spend our sales support teams time by working on opportunities that aren't necessarily going to be good for us or our customer base. So it definitely has helped with that, the approval processing, the different ways that we can utilize the software. They're very, very helpful for us.
And you talked about the speed being a really important driver, right? Being able to move faster. Can you talk a little bit more detail on that, an example or two that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think just taking the information that we receive in an RFQ and being able to turn that now to a carrier base to assist us in supporting the business that's in front of us. We have a very good way that we can speed that now with the Winmore platform of keeping all of the data within the software, turning that and then receiving it back and utilizing that for those bids. So capturing all of that is important for us, and then utilizing it is even more important. And the speed in which we can accomplish that is definitely improved.
One of the areas you talked about was to see how the up-and-coming talent set within ProTrans would embrace the Winmore software, which, again, the feedback we've heard is it tends to feel a little bit more like a consumer app, but in reality it's a business RFQ app.
Right.
You remember talking through that a little bit and as it related to the speed and adoption and engagement of some of the up-and-comers here?
The immediate communication tools that are in there with the conversations and the different ways that transfer information quickly to the different groups as either tasks are completed or set up to be completed, the to-dos that are already pre-populated within the software that allow users to simply log on and see what their next actions are in order to stay in line with the RFQ dates. That's been extremely helpful for ProTrans and something that we look forward to continuing to bring in even those same type of concepts into our TMS solutions and different things, and the way to integrate both the platforms, both from a TMS and a CRM. I think we can really expand that even further, as your vision has shown as we talk through things as well. So
yeah, and some exciting areas to work on together. Some new innovations. And so when you think about where we're headed, are there a few areas that you think are pretty interesting that resonate with you and your role as a commercial leader?
Yeah, I think the analytics side is continuing to be more and more important. The quote unquote big data, how we can see the results of historic bids, and then how do we use those results for future bids, and incorporating all of that. The additional integrations with different softwares that may be out there for the way that we manage implementations, and the expansion of the software from that standpoint looks very intriguing and very helpful for us, because we utilize the software not just for the sales process, but also for the continued operations with managing QBRs and customer feedback and all of that type of follow-up. So, the continued aspect of capturing that on an ongoing basis is important. So, the roadmap is exciting, and we look forward to some of that stuff continuing to roll out and assisting us. So that's good.
Well, it's mutual, and thank you very much for your time and sharing a little bit of your perspective and joining us on this journey together to redefine the RFQ process and the customer journey and sales productivity in a way in which we can focus exclusively on the needs of logistics, because that's what it's about, right?
Absolutely.
Our businesses are not that different, right? It's all about selling a great service and, more importantly, delivering it.
Absolutely.
And a big thank you, Shawn, for joining us and walking us through these examples with some real-world case studies. Marianne, I know we just had a few questions pop in here onto the chat service, so if it makes sense, Shawn and I could take a pass at some of the questions that have come through, and if there's any additional thoughts or feedback or other topics or questions that the audience would like to go ahead and add to the Zoom meeting, please feel free to do that while we address, looks like 3 questions that have just appeared here in the chat box.
Absolutely.
So I think we got
Yeah, go ahead.
That sounds good, Marianne. So I think the first question came up. Could you please take us through an example of an RFQ from start to finish on the Winmore platform? So this is a great example, and one of the offers we did want to make coming out of this discussion here is that there is an interest in actually looking at the product in more detail and seeing some examples. We're very proud of our work at FreightWaves. In fact, Marianne, I think we have a broadcast of our product demo from the most recent FreightWaves conference available up on our site, and we'll include that as part of our follow-up as well. But the best way you could think about Winmore is having a structured workflow that first starts off with the qualification of the RFQ. So as you receive that RFQ from a shipper, the first step that you want to do is have a team get together, look at the opportunity, and make the decision in a typical stage gate approach. Is this an opportunity that we should pursue? Why is that important? Well, at last count, some 22% of RFQs are price checks for incumbent service providers. So the sooner you can realize which RFQs are in fact wastes of your time through price checks so that you can avoid bidding on those, the more successful you'll be. At that point then, the workflow then kicks off tasks to different team members that can include everyone from procurement to the analysis team. You may have contracts and legal involved. The group is basically assigned the work that they need to do in order to basically compile and respond and prepare that bid. That can include steps like looking at bids that have been offered in the same vertical industry. Most recently, we could look at the pricing that we offered in the last term to that specific shipper. We might actually do a query into the TMS and see how much freight they actually shipped with us and which lanes. And all of that's designed to help prepare the best solution we can in that first revision. We follow that up, of course, with multiple revisions too. And then as we've either win or lose the bid or parts of the bid, we then follow a structured post-mortem, which is often an overlooked part of the process as well, where you can really look through the whole process and determine, did we in fact achieve our goals? How are we successful in this accomplishment? And run some rich analytics. To Shawn's point, to identify, are there some trends and patterns here from the lanes we bid on and lost that could represent potentially a new opportunity for us? So that's an example about how the workflow of the application works to help bring the process from A to Z or from cradle to grave. I also do want to highlight that we wrap that entire process in collaboration. So you could think about it as almost a contextual feed of comments and updates and changes in workflows so that you can go at any point and see a complete snapshot of everything happening on that bid, which is really important for a few reasons. You know, number one, when the bid comes in the following year, you can go back to it and look at it and say, hey, here's that whole history. Now I can understand why we priced these lanes the way we did. And actually, as you win the business, then the implementation and onboarding team can benefit from that full history and be able to understand a lot of that context, which is super important given that sometimes there's a change of headcount at the shipper, there's someone new responsible for implementation on your side, so that there's one digital record of everything that's happened, which is very powerful. We also include our own Android and iPhone client, which can go a long way to help spur and accelerate notifications and approvals as well. And if you look at our customers, I'd love to share 3 numbers with you. We have some large customers like an Eden Prairie-based freight broker that reports a 60% increase in the number of qualified bids and RFQs that they can respond to with Winmore. We have another customer that responded with a 25% increase in their win rate. And then a third account that describes a 20% acceleration in the speed of responses. So think about that for a second. 60% more bids in terms of being able to respond to 60% more qualified bids. Number 2, a 25% increase in win rates. And then finally, a 20% acceleration in the time to respond. So some real numbers that, again, directly came from our customers that certainly speak volumes to what we've been able to accomplish together. So great question. Lori, I think you're on the line too. You had asked about whether or not Winmore could be used as a platform for project management. Well, as long as that project's an RFQ or an RFP or a tender, absolutely. That's our focus. We want to make sure that no one confuses us with Microsoft Project, which is geared for, swimming lane level analysis, for example. That's not our focus, right? We want to get the teams together at a freight broker and forwarder and carrier working more closely to help make better decisions. And so, again, we definitely take compliments that some people view us as project management, but we'd much rather be focused on the projects that are RFPs, RFQs, and global tenders, because that's where we really shine and we put all of our resources to build the best products that we can. I think Brent's on the line too. Brent, thank you for your question. You had asked us, Winmore aggregate past RFQ responses and suggest rates based on what we quoted and lost in the past. So this is an area that's absolutely key part of that process of preparing that solution and qualification. When you ask, for example, how many forwarders and brokers qualify bids, the first step they do is they go back and they look through those RFPs. In fact, we learned from one of our customers, DHL, the largest forwarder in the world, that they had actually hired Accenture to build a qualification tool in Excel, spent over $1 million to actually help spur and accelerate that process that took some 3 weeks to arrive at that. And the first step they took was to look at previous bids. So absolutely, Brent, to your point, the first point of that is to really look historically and say, okay, what did we bid on in the past? Not only what were the numbers, but why did we bid it in the past? So going back to that full conversation stream and seeing that full history from a year ago or 6 months ago that explains why people suggested and maybe agreed or disagreed on the pricing strategy can be absolutely a game changer to apply that when the bid comes around the next time again. You'd also about understanding, win-loss reports, and that's really a very powerful capability of Winmore's RFP and collaboration solution. When you buy software in the cloud, right, you often get this great product that is shared with other companies, right? But you lose track of your own data. So we've solved for that. Not only have we built that great cloud-based application model just for the needs of the transportation and logistics industry, and specifically that RFP, tender, and RFQ process, but then we allow our customers to spin up a data mart, which effectively gives you access to just your data, right, running within Winmore. So you could take that data, for example, and plug in a BI tool like Microsoft Power BI that you might use to run reports, or Mode Analytics, or any of the major BI tools, right? You could even look at doing some integration with your TMS to run some really rich, deep analytics around that. And that's where we get really excited, is where we can start making data-driven decisions around the RFP process, which is incredibly exciting for that process to go through. And then finally, so Brent, thank you for asking that question. That was a good one too. I think we've got another one that just popped up that said, hey, how do you typically differentiate between a real RFP and a price check? I know, isn't that a good one? 22% of RFPs are price checks. And the answer to that is qualification, qualification, qualification. So we borrow a lot of concepts from this Six Sigma lean manufacturing framework that basically suggests using a stage gate that looks at all the data, all the inputs, and says, okay, is this worth pursuing to the next stage in the process? We take a very similar approach when the RFP comes in and encourage those teams to work together. The main difference is, though, we don't want to have a 3-hour phone call every other Friday afternoon with the governance team where they check every box. We think it'd be much more effective to have a digital qualification collaboration where individuals can all offer their insights. Procurement can offer some perspective on the rates that have been offered. The carrier team can make suggestions on who could actually fulfill the actual freight orders. The legal can weigh in with a sense of the SOPs and how those stand, for example. And finally, the operations group can also describe some issues when it came to fulfilling the last shipper's RFP and the actual downstream freight that moved with them, and maybe even some exceptions that they encountered along the way. So getting all those people together in a digital framework to make a smart decision to go, no go, is absolutely a critical way of helping drive up the number of qualified bids. And again, our work with some of the most respected names of the industry suggests that there's a great opportunity to improve that. And again, the numbers are 60% increase in the number of qualified bids by bringing these teams together, helping them make a collaborative go, no go decision by looking at all that data and doing that in a digital environment instead of taking up a ton of time in conference calls or sending around long drawn out emails that get lost in your inbox. So those are great questions, and we certainly would welcome the opportunity to present the solution in more detail. And so if there is an interest here, by all means would encourage you to follow up with us, and we'll be contacting you with our contact, Tyler Piotrowski, who's based in our office in New York. Some of you have met Tyler before. He's a staple at the FreightWaves conferences and very enthusiastic and a lot of rich knowledge around the product. So Tyler will be leading the follow-up, and I know there was a question about accessing the recording of the webinar. That'll certainly be available along with this very brief white paper here. Winmore brings order to the RFP chaos, contracted revenue, a case study, and RFQ collaboration. So this summarizes a lot of Shawn's points from the last half hour, provides a great takeaway that should encourage you to start the conversation back at your offices and help explore in the new year if there's ways in which we can, play a role to help you respond to more qualified bids, like our customers in Minnesota, increase your win rates by up to 25%, like our freight broker customer in New Jersey, and then ultimately accelerate the process by upwards of 20%, which is again another great customer testimony that makes us very proud and very pleased with our work. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take those online here or certainly through the chat session. But, Marianne, it's always a pleasure talking with you. We really enjoy our partnership with FreightWaves. We're excited for our continued partnership together with you in 2020, exhibiting at both of your conferences, and now especially with the new partnership forming with the Air Forwarders Association. You can count on us as being a proud FreightWaves sponsor going into the new year as well. So Marianne, thank you so much for all your help in organizing today's discussion.
Yes, thank you so much, John. And as he mentioned, that is about all of the time that we have today. It looks like we're out of questions. If you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to Tyler in the follow-up. And we appreciate you for taking the time to listen in today, obviously to Winmore for your partnership on today's presentation, and also to John and to Shawn for sharing your insights with us today. We appreciate you all being here with us this afternoon and hope you'll join us again for another webinar very soon. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.